Ruchir, I think just coming to you, one of my observations has been that cybersecurity as a domain is very different from a lot of application SaaS, right? It's fairly complicated, complex, mission critical applications. Customers tend to be very demanding. When doing a 0 to 1 for a cybersecurity startup and really assembling that first initial team, right? I think you need to get the right mix of skills to be able to even execute, right, at even early stages. So, how have you gone about thinking through that problem at SydeLabs? And I know that you've done similar things even with Google and with MPL, where you assemble teams, right? So would love to learn from your experience.
Yeah, I think you made a very good point where cybersecurity is very different from other areas when it comes to assembling the team and building a product, right? Like for everything else, almost going with an MVP where you're okay with things failing is much easier. With cybersecurity, you don't have that luxury, right? Like you can't deploy security products and be like, oh, it's still in beta, it might fail and something might go through, right? Like especially if you're on the blue side of security, right? Like where you're defending more than anything else. It's very important to get the right skill set, the right team that can build a really good product that you can take to market, right? Especially when you're selling security. If you're selling security, you can't have a half-baked product. How I've always worked, and it also depends company from company, right? When I was building out a team for Google's India starting team, right? Building from scratch, very different approach to MPL where when I joined, there was no security team. So building that security team, but building a security team for SydeLabs, which is a 0 to 1 startup, all three were very different. For the startup, I felt ownership and mindset was key. Skill set is something we can help if the mindset is correct. So I relied a lot more on my network and people that I have worked with in the past who I know bring in a very strong sense of ownership, because it's something very hard to figure out via interviews, right? Like everybody will show very high level of ownership and integrity in an interview, but you don't know if it exists until you see them work. Right? Relied very heavily on people that I have worked with in the past. And the other area was I use this question this time for SydeLabs, which has helped me. And I don't use it to figure out whether I want to hire them or not, but to check their mentality, right? So I ask whether when they want discussing compensation, I ask whether they want a cash heavy compensation or an ESOP heavy compensation. Even if it doesn't impact my decision to hire or not, it at least tells me their mindset of why they're joining this company, right? Like you don't want to, especially at this stage, you don't want people who are just looking at their next job. And like you want somebody who's looking to build something meaningful, who really believe in the vision that you have. That way you'll end up building a much better product, a much better team. Right? Like your initial team is very critical in that case. And the last thing that I've learned over this short period of building SydeLabs is taking those hard calls very quickly, right? Like when you see there is a mismatch in culture or the mindset, even if the skill exists, that one person could cause a lot more damage than good. And unfortunately, at this stage, you don't have the luxury of training or giving feedback and waiting for things to improve because it's a very small team. So sometimes it may not be the ideal thing you want to do as a person, but as for the best interest of the company, you'll have to take those tough calls much faster than, let's say, what I would have taken at an MPL or a Google, right? Like where you'd put a lot more time in developing and getting that person to adapt to the culture or the mindset of the team. So those have been like my top directions in building out the team. One other interesting insight that I've gotten recently is I was trying to hire for the security expertise on the team, where I found a lot of people are still very stuck on their old school security mindset and learnings. Whereas for AI security, I needed them to open up how they look at security and weren't that adaptive. So in fact, I was a lot more surprised to bringing in brand new people who had that mindset of a hacker, right? Like where they're like, even if though I don't have the skill set or the experience, I like to break the game more than play the game, right? And they're really good hires when it comes to security. So have had really good success with fresh grads, interns who like to break things and have that right mindset.
Yeah, this is a great point, and I think this is a classic trade-off that kind of I felt myself as a founder, and then I think most founders across domains face, which is especially at the early stages, there's a trade-off between somebody who is a great cultural fit, who has a startup athlete skill set, but is not necessarily an expert in your domain, who doesn't probably bring that prior expertise of having built security systems for a Fortune 500 company. On the other hand, you have this person who's like completely trained, who knows how to play the game, deal with big customers, build systems at scale, but is not necessarily ready for a 0 to 1. And I think it's a very classic trade-off that founders have to make, and they're not straightforward in many cases.
I have one more observation to add. I think just to add to what you said, Soumitra, apart from just being ready for 0 to 1, I have also seen if they've never played in the cybersecurity space, being ready for cybersecurity space is going to be one more step up, because it needs a different mentality. The people who are working, the customers that you're going to work with, the kind of products that they expect, everything is different game actually. I have definitely witnessed it, and we in our team, we put conscious effort to actually discuss this and even understand the differences in the culture, how they are working, how we are working, so that we are educating and constantly refining ourselves and catching up and getting up to speed with this. That's super important. So there is one more bar basically. If they've never worked with cybersecurity in the past, even that is going to be something that you have to assess them and watch out whether they are able to adapt or not.